You ever feel like an outsider? By the end of this lesson, we will be able to describe fabric operation as it pertains to sources and destinations outside the SDA fabric. In traditional networks, a significant portion of our traffic is destined to or sourced from networks that exist outside of our internal network. Well, in an SDA fabric situation, that means that we're actually leaving the confines of our network or going to external, maybe unknown sources or destinations. So in this video, we're going to explore those fabric border nodes, those nodes that sit at the edge of our fabric and do the translation for us and get us into and outside of our fabric. Up until now, our focus has been on how network traffic traverses the fabric. However, at some point, we're going to need to leave this fabric. For example, we might have a data center out there that's not typically included in an SDA fabric. Or we might just simply not have migrated fully over to SDA, so maybe part of our network is still legacy. And then, hey, there's always the internet. And so regardless of what the situation is, we're going to have network traffic that needs to get outside of this fabric environment. Now, anytime we have a network that is not part of the fabric, that is going to connect in via a border node. And in our example, we have two different border nodes here. We have an internal border node here on switch 3, and switch 4 over here is an external border node. Let's start with the internal border node. The internal border node is going to connect us to places, for example, like the data center and like our legacy networks. They're known destinations that are part of our existing overall network, just not part of the SDA fabric. As such, we're going to participate in IGPs here, interior gateway protocols, such as EIGRP and OSPF. We're going to form routing adjacencies here and be advertising the SDA subnets out to the external networks, because they still need to know where all of our subnets live. So now that these other networks know where our fabric subnets are, how do our fabric subnets know about the legacy and the data center and all of our other networks? Well, this is going to involve the control plane node. So let's get that on our network here. And the way this works is switch 3, this internal border node, is going to act like an edge node. Except instead of having typical hosts, like here we have host A and host B attached to switches 1 and 2, instead of advertising hosts like that, we're going to advertise the subnets that exist outside of our SDA fabric, the things that we learned via these IGPs. So switch 3, for example, is going to send the map register messages to the control plane node as if it had host attaching to it. However, instead of advertising the host, it's going to advertise the subnets. So the control plane node is going to map external subnets to the RLOC of the border node. So now let's say host B needs to send something to the data center. Well, host B is going to send its packet to switch 2. Switch 2 is going to recognize that as an unknown location, and so it will send a map request to the control plane node. The control plane node is going to respond with the RLOC of the target switch, and in this case, it would be the internal border node. So switch 2 will send it in its tunnel to the border node, and from there, switch 3 will use its traditional routing table to figure out how to forward that traffic towards its destination. So that's the internal border node. What's going on with this external border node? Well, it is considered the default gateway of the fabric. And that is because it represents all of the unknown IP addresses in the fabric. So the internet would fall into this category, sure, but so would any other destination that we simply don't know. So anytime host A sends a packet to switch 1, switch 1's going to send a map request to the control plane node. If the control plane node doesn't know where it's supposed to go, it is going to reply with the RLOC for the external border node. And so we're going to throw that into our tunnel and send it to the external border node and just hope that the external border node knows where to send it. And in most networks, that external border node has a default route that just points upstream. And so it's going to send that traffic upstream and hope for the best. So it's really no different than a typical network where we have default gateways pointing progressively more and more towards the internet. Now, the primary difference between the internal and external border nodes is that we're not doing any kind of map registers to the control plane node. Because, again, we're responsible for unknown traffic. There's no reason for us to tell the control plane node anything because as soon as we know something, it's not unknown anymore. Now, Cisco will tell you that we have 3 different types of border nodes. Number 1 is the internal border node. Number 2 is the external border node. However, number 3 would be a hybrid of the two. We can have a single border node operating in both capacities, but that does require some special configuration. So we just need to find the right configuration, and that usually depends on network topology and size. And with that, you are now able to describe fabric operation as it pertains to sources and destinations outside the SDA fabric. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.